The idea of EarthBound being remade has been thrown around a lot since the 2010s. Once it finally made it back to store shelves on the Wii U eShop, the floodgates opened to the possibility of it happening at some point. Rightfully, none of this speculation has ever been met with any serious regard for the most part. The idea, however, of an EarthBound remake strikes me as at least a little bit unnecessary. A lot of remakes are done now of games that are already highly regarded, and I feel pretty mixed on it. On one hand, some of these remakes have become the definitive ways to experience the games, or entirely new experiences of their own. But on the other hand, I think remaking games people already love is sort of exploitative.
Correct!
Again, they can be good, but shouldn't we be focusing on remaking games that weren't good? Ones that held great promise but left a lot to be desired? Ones, that you have a lot you can improve on? That being said, there are things to improve on in EarthBound, so not even I think it'd be completely pointless to attempt. Oh, and disclaimer by the way, I'm not a game developer. I know video games are a ton of work, and I'm not trying to downplay that. These are just things I'd hypothetically do for a remake if anything was possible, without dealing with money, or schedules, or workers' rights. The first thing I'd do for a remake is make some quality of life changes. A big one for most people would be a retuning of item storage, and Mother Squared is making excellent steps by placing key items and condiments in their own inventories. I'd keep the 14 item slots though. You'd just be too OP if you could store 99 of every item and had a scrolling HP meter. Changing the 14 item system would cause you to have to rebalance the entire game. I would, however, make it so that you could buy multiples of items at stores instead of one at a time. Another menu thing I'd add is the ability to equip items by using them in the characters' inventories. You could do this back in Mother 1 and it'd just be convenient. It'd also be nice if the inventory didn't close every time you used a non-key item. I'd make it so the ATMs would have a layout more similar to Mother 3's Frog Banks. It'd just streamline the process a bit, and generally just some more unclogging of some menus. And it would be so nice if when you continued after dying you were healed instead of having to track down a hospital and hotel or use a bunch of items each time. I wouldn't remove most of the glitches though. Those rock. I think they're part of the experience really. EarthBound's not an obscenely glitchy game to begin with, so I'd just keep them in, because players like that stuff. I thought it was really cool how when they remade Ocarina of Time for the 3DS they kept a lot of them in. Made it feel more faithful to the original, so I see no harm in retaining them as long as they don't destroy your game, sans the 310. Maybe not the rock candy glitch though. Speaking of Ocarina of Time, it always bothered me how games used to just lock you on the ending screen until you rebooted the game, just to spit you out before the final boss again. Makes me feel like the game's sort of taking my victory away from me. Like, I want the game to acknowledge that I've completed it. Nothing crazy like being able to save during the ending, but adding something like a star to a completed save file would be appreciated. But in regards to saving, I do it hardly anyway. Every port of EarthBound lets you save with restore points, or save states, so saving is obsolete. But in a remake that wouldn't have those, it'd be important, so it'd be nice if when you did save and end your game, it booted you back to the title screen instead of just soft locking. A remake also wouldn't be hurt by adding some more save files. In current year, where RPGs drastically bigger than EarthBound have tens of save files, why not? It's hard for me to erase a saved game. Each one has its own little personal story to it. I get attached, because I'm just a little guy. I know some people get like, why would you need that many? And well, that just comes down to how much you like the game, right? In a platformer, it doesn't really matter, but in an RPG, you see a person's brain on screen, their inventory, their armor, it's just more personal. Add some more damn save files. The game's miss rate is notoriously high, so there's something to rebalance. Along with it, when a status like crying is inflicted, it just makes things take an agonizing amount of time in most cases, and often it makes it feel more like the enemy is just trying to waste your time rather than strategically fight you. It's like, oh, you're diagnosed with this battle will now be 10 minutes longer, and it comes with some sound effects. On the note of wasting players' time, Escargot Express. You know what that means? Snail Express. It's because it takes forever to use it. Realizing you have no space, having to track down a phone, call them, then wait for them to arrive is so annoying. Only for them to only be able to take 3 items at a time. This is screwed up. Here's how I'd fix it. You still have to call them, but they show up within 5 seconds. Then take as many items as you want and charge you $18 for every 3 you want to store. Done. Continuing on this tirade, the ultimate weapons. Is this some kind of sick joke? I understand that since they're so powerful, you don't want to just hand them out like candy. But a 1 in 128 chance is less than a 1% drop rate. Frankly, if you're spending so much time grinding for it, by the time you get it, you're over leveled to the point enemies wouldn't even be a threat anyway. It's not an ultimate weapon, it's a trophy. It's nothing more than just something to brag to your friends you got. Yeah, you can get lucky and find it within a few minutes, but you can also spend hours looking for it. Time is the most valuable thing you have. Think about it. When you work a job, you're essentially selling your time and effort. It's why people are put in bad moods by an unsatisfying ending to a book or a boring movie, or especially grinding in a video game. It's wasting their time. In fact, if you feel this video isn't engaging for you at all, turn it off. Don't let me waste your time. Payoffs are important in any kind of story, so when I find the Gutsy Bat, I should be excited to now be super powerful, not level 99 for the last 2 to 3 hours going, oh finally now I don't have to do this anymore. Point being, screw the 1 in 128 challenge. I don't get why this is here also. The Gutsy Bat comes so late it's practically pointless. You end up using it for one fight. The strategy guide infamously misinforms players that the Gutsy Bat is held by one of the Krakens in Magicant. But to be honest, it should be somewhere in Magicant. I know they give you the Magicant bat here, but the player could always choose which one to use. And just use that one if they don't feel like searching for the other one. For a game that respects the player's time enough to cut out pointless battles, this choice is insane to me. I get that these things are all optional, but I don't think it's fair to leave potentially hours of tedious gameplay for a player who just wants to feel like they truly completed the game, entirely up to landing the right number on a D128 they're not even getting to roll themselves. You know what a fun way to mend this could be? Add more bosses. Have some super bosses that drop it 100% of the time. Make the challenge fun instead of tireless. RPG players love that kind of stuff, and it's a simple way to add something new to a remake while improving on the original. I think that if a game's being remade, it's necessary to make additions. Why do something again if you're just going to do it exactly the same? One I'd make is giving the players some more setup options. For starters, adding a setup option in the commands window. Just an easy way to access them at any point, instead of having to restart the game just to change the color of your text box borders. Some settings I'd add here would include an option to turn off all the text windows turning red when a character dies, to toggle it so only the collapsed character's box changes. Totally a personal preference though. I'd also put in a pixel smoothing option. I know some purists are probably screaming that it makes the game ugly or whatever, but you have to remember that when the game was being developed, it was designed with CRT TVs in mind for displaying it, and they were even counting on it to smooth the pixels to make the game less pixely. Sprite art is beautiful and a very complex art as well, but the goal of it has always been to look seamless from further away, which the developers were designing the artwork with in mind. And as long as it's toggleable, it certainly doesn't hurt anything. Some actual things I'd add to the game would be some text from Frank after you beat him where he lets you know he'll heal you from then on. Always bothered me that there was no indication of this, as it's super helpful not having to pay for a hotel or go all the way back home to heal from this point, but a surprising amount of people never knew this. I'd also add a PK teleport point to Happy Happy Village. Mondo Mole isn't required on the first visit, so it'd be nice to have an easy way to return here for players who decide to go out of order. Another thing that also stuck out to me is that every protagonist except Paula gets their own solo section. It'd be nice to add one, but I'm very conditional on that one. A toy would have to be the person to write it for me to be okay with it. A pipe dream for sure, but we're talking about an EarthBound remake here. Another unrealistic one I'd love to see would be actual renders of the Photo Man's pictures during the credits. One step further, it'd be awesome if they were dynamic, so characters would change depending on their status when they were taken, like in the original game. One more thing I think would be a helpful addition would be a useful map for the Monkey Maze. I personally don't have a problem with it, but I've also played that section of the game more than most people have, and since it's a sequence I do see people complaining about, it could work. A sound test on the file select screen would be cool too, even being dynamic like Mother 3's where tracks won't show their names until you encounter them in game. Pretty minor, but why not? The element I'd mostly branch out with would be adding post-game content. Like I mentioned earlier, a completion star would be nice, but what would be awesome is if there was a new game plus, where you could replay the game starting with all of your PSI moves and double enemies' HP and give them an attack multiplier. And since this mode would be for experienced players, it'd include an uber tech skip option a la Majora's Mask, since the mode would be more gameplay focused than story. That way the hardcore players could get right into the challenge, as well as cutting parts like having to go back and forth for the bad key machine and Apple Kid immediately giving you the pencil eraser. And to top it all off, maybe Ness could be in his pajamas the whole time, sorta like Wind Waker's Hero Mode, where Link stays in his regular clothes instead. Maybe by completing it, you could be rewarded with some bonus aesthetic changes as well. It could add another star to the completed save file, maybe even a third one if you complete it without dying. It could also allow you to change the Chosen 4's outfits to the ones of the Chosen 4's from the other Mother games. Or even unlock some concept art / development type stuff, like in Sonic Jam. Or even some translated versions of those old 4-panel comics if you want some real deep cuts. Only other things I could think to add were maybe some small animations, like some sort of reaction from Ness at the sanctuaries, more status ailments changing the character's overworld appearances, and yes, the most important addition of all, Venus kissing Ness. Those and maybe a bestiary. It could even just straight up be a battle memory, and if they were absolute madmen, maybe even back in alt sprites for characters like in Mother 3. In my opinion, this sort of pseudo Sonic 3 air approach seems like the best route for an EarthBound remake. Maybe even throwing in some options like changing the PSI effects between the EarthBound and Mother 3 versions, or a chase between the Lindblom localization or a script more faithful to the original Mother 2, like Maternal Bound.
Like that's ever gonna happen.
The thing I didn't mention that a lot of you are probably surprised by was a visual overhaul. One of the biggest checks on fans' EarthBound remake wish lists is a complete recreation of the world in a clay style akin to the models, and I think that would be awesome. But I think the whole "we need this" begging for it is a bit misguided. Again, not opposed to it, but some things need to be kept in mind when attempting a change like that. Visual changes are a dangerous tightrope to walk, trying to keep the original art direction intact while still making significant enough changes to justify even doing it. Here's the thing. EarthBound still looks great to this day, and better yet, it's still stylistically distinct. Playing devil's advocate here, altering the style in EarthBound's case could put it at risk of losing its distinctness, specifically in the realm of other Nintendo games. EarthBound hasn't been just massively influential to the indie game scene, it's had ripple effects on tons of Nintendo's own franchises. Several of Nintendo's recent games even take at least some partial visual cues from the Mother series. So overhauling the visuals to make it look that way could end up endangering it to look like a bunch of other games, even though it had a big hand in starting it. Not to suggest the game didn't derive its style from other influences as well. This is why I'd elect to make mostly smaller changes, like adding some more shading to certain areas could be nice. I think the Mother 3 Redrawn project is a great example of how a remake should look, faithful to the original art direction while taking strides. The most success I've seen in heavily revamping EarthBound's visuals has been with Dimensions, but even it's still keeping things pretty simple overall, and results in the map having to be redesigned too. But the point isn't all about whether an updated art style would look good. What we're really looking at is how it changes EarthBound. Redoing the visuals would be awesome, yes, but there's a lot of other things to account for, because making that change also changes everything around it. A great example is the Switch version of Link's Awakening. The game feels slower than the original because of its revamped graphics. Full 3D has a lot more to account for than 2D, animation and camera-wise. And before everyone says, a Mother game would totally work in 3D, just look at the Mother 3 tribute! First off, that's not a game, it's a video. An incredible one, but it could have been made to look any way the creators wanted it to. Second, if this was a proposed remake of Mother 3, even if it felt similar, there's no denying these two things move very differently. And I'm not saying these are necessarily bad things, they're just different. In my view, however, this shift in how the game feels when you're controlling it is more major than it might seem at a passing thought. The main component to the video game medium are the controls. How a game feels when you're controlling it is the most defining part of the experience. Story is very important, but the most visceral element you remember from playing a game is how it felt, because you spent 1,000 times longer using the controller to play it than you did watching the cutscenes. It's also what makes overlaps of these elements in games so powerful, and by making those controls feel different while keeping most other things, namely the camera, the same, you create a disconnect. You're no longer playing EarthBound, you're playing the EarthBound remake. Like how if someone says Megaman 2, you think of Megaman 2, not the Wily Wars. And this occurs regardless of a remake's quality. There's a split in your perception of it, and I want to reiterate that this isn't inherently a bad thing, but it's something that needs to be considered, especially in EarthBound's case. When considering the series' track record of release outside Japan, a remake would most likely become the most played version of the game. Remakes, however, do need to take risks when being developed, otherwise you're left with essentially a port or an inferior version of a classic. The whole idea of doing a remake of a video game is to attempt to make the original better or to take it in a new direction. And, if we're being critical, the only changes that would legitimately better the experience in my opinion are the smaller changes. The ones that trim the fat, just the little annoyances to cut the game down as close as possible to having none of them at all. So, if EarthBound is already great, the only reasons to remake it should be, like I said before, to either take the game in a new direction or fix the existing problems in the original. And since the game is so highly revered for its world, characters, and story, it would make the most sense to me if you were to remake it to go with option B, but either could work in the right people's hands. EarthBound's graphics are one of its most beloved elements and have proven to be highly influential. So then if remaking it, why focus on changing the things nobody's complaining about? We just need to think about it in terms of which changes would actually improve the experience and which ones would just be cool. In well-made games, things are designed very intentionally, so just changing them up without considering for everything around these elements is a recipe for disaster. So then the question becomes, is it necessary to remake an entire game just to improve the graphics? Well, it depends. Going back to Link's Awakening, the original was crippled in its ability to deliver a visually stunning experience in many aspects due to the limitations of the hardware. Not to suggest the game looks bad or anything, far from it, but it was limited, even more so in the case of the original black and white version. Link's Awakening for the Switch was able to greatly expand on this element, but at the cost of some of the more open movement of the original, and similarly to the original's capacity for visuals, the controls are far from bad, but they are different. And the overhaul of the visuals clearly took precedence in the game's development. It looks stunning, but it's disappointing the developers missed some clear spots for improvement from the original outside that. Why still only 2 item buttons, especially post Wind Waker HD? There's a few items you don't have to map anymore, but there's still plenty of available buttons never used that could have been more item registers, so you're still constantly pausing the game to equip them. Love the shallow depth of field to resemble how dreamlike sequences are portrayed in many films, but there's still a ton of lacking puzzles. You can still only move in 8 directions on a system with 2 analog sticks, but hey, there's a crappy dungeon maker! The biggest improvement gameplay-wise is that warping is easier. Also, the Switch can barely run the damn thing. These things don't make the game bad, but show perhaps a misallocation of focus on its different elements. I don't understand why more bad games aren't remade. It's like, wouldn't it make sense to remake the games that could actually benefit from being redone? So, why the heavy focus on the ones that are already great? Brand recognition. It for sure incentivizes companies just slapping a popular franchise onto something else for the sake of advertising, but to be fair, that doesn't always result in a bad game. I won't lie, I'm a cynical guy, and remakes of popular games get me all critical. I'll just say, with Nintendo's recent track record with how they've handled their remakes, I've been left pretty unimpressed. Guess the good news is more than likely a toy would be pretty involved with a remake if it was ever done, and to be honest is probably a large reason it hasn't been done already. Fella's getting up there. And if you really want to remake a Mother game, why not Mother 1? It's easily the candidate that stands the most to gain from a remake. A lot of restraint I expressed with my ideas for an EarthBound remake wouldn't even necessarily be warranted for a remake of the original. It's a game that's really dated, and definitely the one least Mother fans have even seen through to the end. So why not go crazy with the updates on this one instead of the later games? The battles can be really awkward, balancing straight up incomplete, and the visuals, well, not ugly, are certainly bland compared to its sequels. I think an overhaul to this entry would be the chance to make it far surpass the original, and since it's now re-released regularly enough, and widely emulated, the original game's in no danger of being lost to the archives. It'd even be a great testing grounds for attempting to remake a Mother game. It'd be a great chance for whatever team would develop it to prove if they're up to the task of remaking the others. I'm open to the idea of updating games, but like everyone else who loves this series, care about it a lot. And if it's done, just want it to be done justice. To see them be cared for in the same way that pretty much only has been done by a toy himself. Which brings us to our real question. What do fans want out of a remake of EarthBound? Do we want something that'd be the truly definitive experience of the game? Or something that reminds us of what we loved about the original? And neither answer is wrong. It's totally possible to do a remake of something that's more of a fresh coat of paint to sort of relive the original in a more modern way that's just as good or even better than the original, as well as one that takes more drastic strides to improve on what was already there, even if it's not always successful. Or crap,